In the bustling metropolis of Sao Paulo, Mariana Alves led a life that seemed ordinary on the surface, but was about to take an extraordinary turn. It was a balmy evening in late autumn when Mariana, exhausted from a long day at work, settled into her favorite armchair with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. As she absent-mindedly scrolled through her social media feed, a notification popped up, announcing a new message from someone named Claire Thompson. Mariana's brow furrowed in confusion. She couldn't recall knowing anyone by that name. Curiosity piqued, she opened the message, unknowingly stepping into a whirlwind of emotions and revelations that would forever alter the course of her life. The message began with an apology for the unexpected contact, followed by words that made Mariana's heart skip a beat. "I believe we might be sisters." For a moment, time stood still. Mariana's mind raced, trying to process the implications of those 6 simple words. She had grown up as an only child, cherished by her parents, never once suspecting there might be a sibling out there somewhere. Surely, this must be a mistake, a case of mistaken identity, or perhaps even a scam. Yet, as she read on, the details Claire shared became increasingly difficult to dismiss. Claire explained that she had recently discovered she was adopted and had been searching for her birth family. Through a DNA testing service, she had found a close genetic match, Mariana. The shock of this revelation left Mariana reeling. Her hands trembled as she set down her phone, needing a moment to collect her thoughts. Questions flooded her mind. How could this be possible? Why had her parents never mentioned anything about a sister? Was there any truth to this stranger's claim? After what felt like an eternity but was merely minutes, Mariana picked up her phone again, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she contemplated her response. She decided to approach the situation with caution, asking Claire for more information while neither confirming nor denying any relation. As they began to exchange messages, Mariana found herself drawn into a conversation that felt surprisingly natural, despite the extraordinary circumstances. Claire, it turned out, lived in London but had traced her roots back to Brazil. She shared details about her life, her career as a marine biologist, her love for classical music, and her passion for environmental conservation. With each message, Mariana discovered more similarities between them. They both had a peculiar birthmark on their left shoulder, an uncanny ability to wiggle their ears, and a shared aversion to cilantro that made them both laugh. These commonalities, while seemingly trivial, began to chip away at Mariana's initial skepticism. As their conversation deepened, Mariana felt a mix of emotions swirling within her. Excitement at the possibility of having a sister warred with anxiety about what this could mean for her relationship with her parents. She had always been close to them, and the thought that they might have kept such a monumental secret from her was both painful and bewildering. Yet, she couldn't deny the growing connection she felt with Claire. There was something in the way Claire expressed herself, a familiar cadence in her writing that resonated with Mariana on a level she couldn't quite explain. As the night wore on, Mariana found herself sharing more about her own life, her work as an architect, her dreams of designing sustainable housing projects, and her weekend hobby of salsa dancing. Claire responded with enthusiasm, and soon they were exchanging photos, marveling at the subtle resemblances they could see in each other's features. The more they talked, the more real this unexpected connection became. Mariana's mind raced with possibilities. If Claire truly was her sister, what did that mean for her understanding of her family, her identity, and her place in the world? She had always felt a sense of completeness in her life, but now she wondered if there had been a missing piece all along, a peace she hadn't even known to look for. As dawn broke over Sao Paulo, Mariana realized she had spent the entire night conversing with Claire. Exhaustion tugged at her eyelids, but her mind was too wired to consider sleep. She knew she needed to talk to her parents to uncover the truth behind this potential hidden chapter of her family history. The prospect filled her with equal parts dread and determination. How would she broach such a sensitive subject? How would her parents react? Would this revelation strengthen their bond or create an irreparable rift? Mariana decided to take a day off work, knowing she wouldn't be able to focus on architectural designs with such weighty matters on her mind. She spent the morning in a daze, replaying her conversation with Claire and trying to reconcile this new information with everything she thought she knew about her life. By afternoon, she had gathered the courage to call her parents, asking if she could come over for dinner that evening. There was an urgency in her voice that she couldn't quite mask, and she sensed her mother's concern over the phone. As Mariana made her way across the city to her childhood home, her stomach churned with anxiety. The familiar streets she had walked countless times now seemed different somehow, as if the very fabric of her reality had shifted. When she arrived, the warm embrace of her parents momentarily soothed her nerves, but as they sat down to dinner, the weight of her unspoken questions hung heavy in the air. Finally, after pushing food around her plate for several minutes, Mariana took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them about Claire's message, about their conversation, and about the striking similarities they had discovered. As she spoke, she watched her parents' expressions change from confusion to shock, and finally to a mixture of guilt and sorrow that confirmed her suspicions before they even uttered a word. What followed was a night of revelations, tears, and long overdue honesty. Her parents shared the painful story of a difficult time in their lives, years before Mariana was born, when they had made the heart-wrenching decision to give up a child for adoption. They spoke of their struggles, their regrets, and the love they had carried for that child all these years. They explained how they had always intended to tell Mariana when the time was right, but that moment never seemed to come. As Mariana listened, her anger at being kept in the dark melted into compassion for the complex emotions her parents had grappled with for so long. The world as she knew it had been turned upside down, yet paradoxically, she felt a new sense of completeness beginning to take root. In the days that followed, Mariana and Claire continued to communicate, sharing more about their lives and beginning to navigate the complexities of their newfound relationship. They made plans for Claire to visit Sao Paulo, both excited and nervous about meeting face-to-face for the first time. Mariana found herself in a whirlwind of emotions, processing her parents' revelation, getting to know her sister, and reimagining her family dynamic. It was overwhelming at times, but there was also an undeniable sense of joy in discovering this new connection. As she prepared for Claire's visit, Mariana reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a simple message. She marveled at how life could change in an instant, how a single piece of information could reshape one's entire world. While there were still many questions to be answered and challenges to face, Mariana felt a growing excitement for the future. She looked forward to building a relationship with the sister she never knew she had, to understanding more about her family's history, and to embracing this new chapter in her life with open arms and an open heart. Marina's heart raced as she zipped up her suitcase, her fingers trembling with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The decision to travel to Melbourne had been brewing in her mind for months, but it wasn't until this moment that the reality of her impending journey truly sank in. She glanced around her small apartment, taking in the familiar surroundings she'd soon be leaving behind. The walls seemed to whisper memories of late-night conversations and shared laughter with her best friend, Julia. Marina's thoughts drifted to their recent discussion, recalling the concern etched on Julia's face as they debated the risks of embarking on such an adventure. Julia's words echoed in her mind, a blend of cautionary advice and reluctant encouragement. "Are you sure about this, Marina?" Julia had asked, her eyes searching for any hint of hesitation. "Melbourne is so far away, and you've never been on your own for so long." Marina had simply nodded, a determined smile playing on her lips. She understood Julia's worries, but the pull of the unknown was too strong to resist. As she stood in her soon-to-be former home, Marina realized that this journey was about more than just visiting a new city. It was about discovering herself, pushing beyond the boundaries of her comfort zone, and embracing the unpredictable nature of life. With a deep breath, she picked up her suitcase and headed for the door, ready to begin her odyssey into the unfamiliar. The taxi ride to the airport was a blur of anticipation and last-minute mental checklists. Marina's mind raced through potential scenarios, imagining the sights, sounds, and experiences that awaited her in Melbourne. As the cityscape gave way to the sprawling airport complex, a flutter of nervousness settled in her stomach. She checked in, navigated security, and found herself in the bustling international terminal, surrounded by travelers from all walks of life. Each face she saw seemed to hold a story, a destination, a dream. Marina wondered if any of them felt the same mix of emotions coursing through her veins. As she settled into a seat near her gate, she pulled out her phone to send one last message to Julia. "At the airport now. I know you're worried, but I promise I'll be careful. Thank you for always supporting me, even when you think I'm crazy. I'll miss you." She hit send and leaned back, closing her eyes for a moment. The overhead speakers crackled to life, announcing the boarding of her flight. With a deep breath, Marina gathered her belongings and joined the queue of passengers. As she handed her boarding pass to the attendant, she felt as if she were stepping over an invisible threshold, leaving behind the familiar and stepping into a world of possibilities. The flight was long, filled with moments of restless sleep, in-flight movies, and quiet contemplation. Marina watched through the window as continents and oceans passed beneath her, marveling at the vastness of the world and the relatively small space she had occupied in it until now. As the plane began its descent into Melbourne, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold. Marina's heart quickened as the cityscape came into view, a sprawling metropolis waking up to a new day. She had researched Melbourne extensively, poring over travel guides and online forums. But nothing could have prepared her for the rush of emotions as she stepped off the plane and into the arrivals hall. The air felt different, charged with promise and potential. Marina made her way through customs, her eyes darting around, taking in every detail of her new surroundings. As she emerged into the public area of the airport, her gaze was drawn to a small crowd gathered near the exit. Amid the sea of unfamiliar faces, one stood out, causing Marina's breath to catch in her throat. A young woman with wavy auburn hair and bright green eyes was holding a sign with Marina's name written in elegant cursive. For a moment, Marina froze, her luggage forgotten at her feet. This wasn't part of the plan, she hadn't arranged for anyone to meet her. Yet something about the stranger's warm smile and the sparkle in her eyes made Marina's initial apprehension melt away. With hesitant steps, she approached the woman, who lowered the sign and extended her hand. "Marina?" the stranger asked, her voice tinged with an accent Marina couldn't quite place. I'm Olivia. I hope you don't mind the surprise welcome." Marina shook Olivia's hand, feeling an unexpected spark of connection. "I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. How did you know I was coming?" Olivia's laugh was melodious and infectious. "It's a bit of a long story. Your friend Julia reached out to a mutual acquaintance, worried about you arriving in a new city alone. I volunteered to be your unofficial welcome committee and local guide, if you'd like." The mention of Julia brought a mix of emotions: gratitude for her friend's thoughtfulness and a twinge of exasperation at her overprotectiveness. But as Marina looked into Olivia's kind eyes, she found herself nodding. "I'd like that very much, actually. Thank you." As they made their way out of the airport and into the vibrant streets of Melbourne, Marina felt a sense of ease she hadn't expected. Olivia's presence was comforting, and her enthusiasm for the city was contagious. They chatted as if they'd known each other for years, sharing stories and laughing at the serendipity that had brought them together. Olivia pointed out landmarks and shared anecdotes about the city's history and culture, bringing Melbourne to life in a way no guidebook ever could. As the hours flew by, Marina realized that her journey had already taken an unexpected and delightful turn. The connection she felt with Olivia was instantaneous and profound, as if they were two old souls reuniting after lifetimes apart. They explored the laneways of the city center, marveling at the street art that transformed ordinary walls into canvases of creativity. They sipped coffee in hidden cafes, savoring the rich flavors and the even richer conversations. Olivia introduced Marina to the eclectic mix of cuisines that Melbourne was famous for, and together they discovered hidden gems tucked away in the city's diverse neighborhoods. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the Yarra River, Marina found herself sitting beside Olivia on the banks, their shoulders touching lightly. The city lights began to twinkle, reflecting off the water like 1,000 stars. In that moment, Marina felt a profound sense of gratitude for Julia's concern that had led to this unexpected meeting, for Olivia's kindness and instant friendship, and for her own courage in taking this leap into the unknown. She turned to Olivia, words of thanks on her lips, only to find her new friend gazing at her with a soft smile. No words were needed, the connection between them spoke volumes. As night fell over Melbourne, Marina knew that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary adventure. The journey that had started with a decision made in the quiet of her apartment had already exceeded her wildest dreams. With Olivia by her side and a city full of wonders waiting to be explored, Marina felt ready to embrace every moment of this new chapter in her life. The unknown that had once seemed daunting now felt like an invitation to discover not just a new place, but a new version of herself. And as she and Olivia walked hand in hand through the vibrant streets of Melbourne, Marina knew that sometimes, the most beautiful journeys are the ones we never saw coming. The night air was thick with tension as Sarah and Claire hurried down the dimly lit street, their footsteps echoing off the buildings that loomed around them. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, her senses on high alert as she glanced over her shoulder for what felt like the 100th time. Claire, usually the more composed of the two, was visibly shaken, her eyes darting from shadow to shadow as they made their way through the city. It had started as a typical evening out, two friends catching up over dinner and drinks. But as they left the restaurant, Sarah noticed a sleek black car that seemed to be following them. At first, she dismissed it as paranoia, a remnant of her years working as a private investigator. But as they turned down one street after another, the car remained a constant presence, always just far enough behind to maintain plausible deniability. Claire, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the city, "Don't look now, but I think we're being followed." Claire's eyes widened, but she managed to keep her composure, trusting her friend's instincts. They quickened their pace, ducking into alleys and taking sudden turns in an attempt to lose their pursuer. For a moment, it seemed to work, the sound of the car's engine fading into the distance. Relief washed over them as they approached Claire's apartment building, a sanctuary in the midst of their unexpected ordeal. But as they climbed the stairs to the third floor, that sense of safety evaporated. Claire's door was ajar, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. Sarah instinctively placed a hand on Claire's arm, holding her back. Years of experience had taught her to be cautious in situations like this. "Stay here," Sarah murmured, her voice low and steady. She approached the door carefully, her body tense and ready for anything. With a gentle push, the door swung open, revealing the chaos within. Claire's apartment, usually a model of tidiness, had been ransacked. Furniture was overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor, and papers were strewn everywhere. Claire gasped behind her, the sound a mixture of shock and dismay. "Oh my God, Sarah. What happened?" Sarah didn't answer immediately, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the scene before her. This wasn't a simple burglary, the intruders had been looking for something specific. But what? As they cautiously entered the apartment, careful not to disturb any potential evidence, Sarah's investigative instincts kicked into high gear. She scanned the room, noting the areas that had been searched most thoroughly. The desk, the bookshelf, even the potted plants had been upturned. Whoever had done this was desperate and thorough. Claire moved through the space in a daze, her fingers trailing over appended furniture and scattered possessions. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just an accountant. I don't have anything worth stealing." But even as the words left her mouth, a flicker of doubt crossed her face, as if she were suddenly questioning everything she thought she knew about her life. Sarah caught that fleeting expression, and it confirmed what she had already begun to suspect. There was more to this story than met the eye. She had known Claire for years, considered her one of her closest friends, but in that moment, Sarah realized there were depths to Claire she had never explored. "Claire," Sarah said gently, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder, "I think it's time we had a talk. A real talk." Claire nodded, her eyes meeting Sarah's with a mixture of fear and resignation. They made their way to the kitchen, the one area of the apartment that seemed relatively untouched, and sat at the small table. For a long moment, silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken questions and secrets. Finally, Claire took a deep breath and began to speak. "There's something I've never told you, Sarah. Something about my past that I've been running from for years." The words came out in a rush, as if Claire had been holding them back for too long. As Claire's story unfolded, Sarah listened with growing amazement and concern. Claire revealed a past life filled with intrigue and danger, a far cry from the quiet, unassuming accountant Sarah had known. She spoke of classified documents, corporate espionage, and a decision made years ago that had forced her into hiding. With each revelation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The car following them, the ransacked apartment, it all pointed to Claire's past catching up with her. But why now, after all these years? What had changed to bring these shadows back into Claire's life? As the night wore on, Sarah and Claire delved deeper into the mystery, piecing together clues from Claire's memories and the evidence left behind by the intruders. It became clear that the only way to ensure their safety was to confront this threat head-on. They couldn't go to the police. Claire's past made that impossible. They were on their own. In that moment, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the windows, Sarah and Claire made a decision. They would investigate Claire's past together, uncover the truth behind the break-in, and face whatever dangers lay ahead as a team. Sarah's investigative skills combined with Claire's insider knowledge of her former life could be a powerful combination. As they began to formulate a plan, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was more than just another case. It was personal, with her friend's life and freedom hanging in the balance. But there was also a thrill in the challenge, a chance to put her skills to the ultimate test. For Claire, the decision brought a sense of both relief and fear. She had carried the weight of her secrets for so long, always looking over her shoulder, never truly allowing herself to trust or connect deeply with others. Now, with everything laid bare, she felt vulnerable but also strangely liberated. As the sun rose over the city, casting long shadows across the disheveled apartment, Sarah and Claire began their investigation in earnest. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were determined to see it through to the end. Whatever secrets lay buried in Claire's past, whatever forces were working against them, they would face them together. The journey they were about to embark on would test their friendship, their courage, and their resolve. It would take them into the darkest corners of Claire's past and force them to confront truths that had long been hidden. But as they set out that morning, fueled by determination and the strength of their newfound partnership, Sarah and Claire were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did they know that their decision to delve into Claire's past would unravel a conspiracy far larger and more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. The game was afoot, and the stakes were higher than ever. In the bustling streets of Sao Paulo, a woman named Maria walked with purpose, her heart pounding with anticipation. For years, she had lived with a nagging feeling that something about her past wasn't quite right. Today, she was determined to uncover the truth that had eluded her for so long. As she approached the nondescript office building, Maria took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had finally mustered the courage to hire a private investigator to delve into her murky history, hoping to shed light on the circumstances of her adoption. The investigator, a grizzled man named Carlos, greeted her with a knowing nod. "I've found something," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "But I must warn you, Maria, what I've uncovered may change everything you thought you knew about yourself." Maria's hands trembled as she reached for the thick manila folder Carlos held out to her. As she began to leaf through the documents, her eyes widened in disbelief. The truth was far more shocking than she could have ever imagined. According to the meticulous research Carlos had conducted, Maria's adoption was not an isolated incident but part of a much larger, sinister operation. The papers revealed a complex web of international baby trafficking that had been operating for decades, spanning multiple continents and involving countless families. Maria felt her world spin as she realized that she, along with hundreds of other children, had been torn from their birth parents and sold to unsuspecting adoptive families. As Maria delved deeper into the documents, she discovered a trail of corruption that led to high-ranking officials, respected doctors, and even members of the clergy. The scale of the operation was staggering, and its tentacles reached far beyond the borders of Brazil. Names, dates, and locations blurred together as Maria tried to make sense of the information before her. She learned of clandestine meetings in dimly lit back rooms, forged documents, and a network of complicit individuals who had profited from the pain and loss of countless families. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had learned, Maria stumbled out of Carlos's office and into the busy street. The world around her seemed to move in slow motion as she grappled with the implications of her discovery. She was no longer just Maria, the adopted daughter of loving parents. She was a victim, a survivor, and now, unwittingly, a key to unraveling a decades-long conspiracy. As night fell, Maria found herself wandering aimlessly through the city, her mind racing with questions. Who were her real parents? Did they still search for her? How many other lives had been irrevocably altered by this nefarious scheme? She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the figure that seemed to materialize out of the shadows, keeping pace with her as she walked. "Maria," a voice called out, soft but insistent. She spun around, startled, to find herself face to face with a woman who looked to be in her 60s. The woman's eyes, a striking shade of green, bore into Maria's with an intensity that made her catch her breath. "I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time," the woman said, her voice trembling with emotion. Instinctively, Maria knew that this encounter was far from random. The woman before her held answers to questions Maria hadn't even thought to ask yet. "Who are you?" Maria managed to whisper, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the city. The woman smiled sadly, tears glistening in her eyes. "My name is Isabella, and I knew your mother. I've been searching for you for over 3 decades." Maria felt her knees go weak, and Isabella gently guided her to a nearby bench. As they sat down, Isabella began to unravel a tale that was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Isabella had been a nurse at the hospital where Maria was born. She had witnessed firsthand the cruel machinations of the baby trafficking ring and had spent years gathering evidence and searching for the children who had been taken. "Your mother," Isabella explained, her voice thick with emotion, "she never stopped looking for you. She died 5 years ago, still hoping to find you one day." As Isabella spoke, pieces of Maria's fractured identity began to fall into place. She learned of her mother's desperate fight to keep her child, of the deceit and manipulation that had torn them apart, and of the relentless pursuit of justice that had consumed Isabella's life. With each revelation, Maria felt a mix of grief for the life she might have had and gratitude for the truth she now possessed. As dawn broke over the city, Maria and Isabella sat in a small cafe, poring over old photographs and documents that Isabella had brought with her. Maria traced the features of her birth mother's face, noting with a start the similarities to her own. She learned of her family's heritage, of the circumstances that had made them vulnerable to the traffickers, and of the countless others who had suffered the same fate. With this newfound knowledge came a sense of purpose that Maria had never experienced before. She knew that she could not keep this information to herself. The truth needed to be told, not just for her own sake, but for all those who had been affected by this sprawling conspiracy. As she and Isabella parted ways, with promises to stay in touch and continue their investigation, Maria felt a renewed determination coursing through her veins. In the weeks and months that followed, Maria threw herself into unraveling the full extent of the trafficking network. She reached out to journalists, lawyers, and activists, sharing her story and the evidence she had gathered. Slowly but surely, others began to come forward, adoptees who had long harbored suspicions about their origins, birth parents who had never given up hope, and even former members of the trafficking ring who were racked with guilt and ready to confess. As the story broke in the media, it sent shockwaves through Brazilian society and beyond. Investigations were launched, arrests were made, and long-buried secrets were finally brought to light. Maria found herself at the center of a movement, a voice for those who had been silenced for far too long. She testified before government committees, spoke at international conferences, and worked tirelessly to reunite families torn apart by the trafficking ring. Through it all, Maria grappled with her own complex emotions. She mourned the loss of the life she might have had with her birth family, while also feeling deep gratitude for the love and care she had received from her adoptive parents. She struggled with anger towards those who had orchestrated the trafficking ring, but also found compassion for the many who had been caught up in its web unknowingly. As the years passed, Maria's journey of discovery transformed into a lifelong mission of advocacy and healing. She founded an organization dedicated to supporting victims of child trafficking and worked to change laws and policies to prevent such atrocities from happening in the future. And though the pain of her past never fully faded, Maria found solace in the knowledge that her story had helped bring truth and justice to light, offering hope and closure to countless others who had long lived in the shadow of uncertainty. Sarah's fingers trembled as she clutched the worn envelope, its edges frayed from years of neglect. The return address, faded but still legible, bore the name of the orphanage she had called home for the first 18 years of her life. With a deep breath, she tore open the seal, her heart racing as she unfolded the crisp paper within. The words blurred before her eyes, but one sentence stood out in stark clarity: "We've found your birth parents." For years, Sarah had imagined this moment, rehearsed the emotions she thought she'd feel. But now, faced with the reality, she found herself paralyzed by an overwhelming mix of anticipation and dread. The life she had carefully constructed over the past decade suddenly felt like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze. As she read on, the details of her origin story unfolded like a tattered map, each revelation a new landmark in a foreign land. Her birth parents, it seemed, had been caught up in a web of deceit and danger, forced to give her up to protect her from enemies they had made in their tumultuous past. The letter hinted at a legacy of secrets, a birthright Sarah had never known she possessed. With trembling hands, she dialed the number provided at the bottom of the letter. A gruff voice answered, identifying himself as Detective Reeves. "Miss Thompson," he said, his tone grave, "I'm glad you called. There's much we need to discuss, and time is of the essence." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of revelations and confrontations. Sarah found herself thrust into a world she had only ever glimpsed in movies and books. Her parents, she learned, had been undercover agents, their lives a carefully crafted lie designed to infiltrate a powerful criminal organization. But something had gone wrong, forcing them to make the heart-wrenching decision to give up their only child. As Sarah delved deeper into her past, she was confronted with the harsh realities of her parents' choices. The people responsible for her turbulent history were not faceless villains, but complex individuals caught in a web of loyalty, duty, and survival. She found herself face to face with former colleagues of her parents, each encounter a minefield of emotions and revelations. One such meeting stood out in particular. In a dimly lit cafe, Sarah sat across from a man who had once been her father's closest friend. His eyes, weary with the weight of decades of secrets, met hers with a mixture of regret and hope. "Your parents," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "they never wanted to leave you. But the danger, it was too great. They made the ultimate sacrifice to keep you safe." As he spoke, Sarah felt a war raging within her. Part of her wanted to lash out, to blame this man and others like him for the loneliness and uncertainty that had defined her childhood. But another part recognized the impossible choices they had faced, the courage it must have taken to give up everything for her safety. This internal conflict became a constant companion as Sarah unraveled the mystery of her past. Each new piece of information presented her with moral dilemmas that tested the very foundations of her beliefs. She found herself questioning the nature of right and wrong, of loyalty and betrayal, of love and sacrifice. One night, as she pored over old case files and faded photographs, Sarah came across a cipher her mother had left behind. With trembling fingers, she decoded the message, her heart pounding as the truth revealed itself. Her parents had uncovered evidence of corruption at the highest levels of government, a conspiracy that threatened the very fabric of democracy. Their disappearance hadn't just been about protecting her, it had been about safeguarding information that could topple empires. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on Sarah like a physical force. She now held in her hands the power to expose decades of lies and manipulation. But with that power came an awesome responsibility and the potential for devastating consequences. Lives could be ruined, institutions could crumble, and the ripple effects could reshape the world as she knew it. As dawn broke on the 7th day of her journey into the past, Sarah found herself standing at a crossroads. To her left lay the path of truth, fraught with danger but illuminated by the promise of justice. To her right, the road of silence offered safety but at the cost of perpetuating the very lies that had torn her family apart. In that moment of decision, Sarah felt the presence of her parents more strongly than ever before. She could almost hear their voices, whispering guidance and encouragement. With a deep breath, she made her choice, knowing that whatever path she chose would irrevocably alter the course of her life and the lives of countless others. As she took her first step forward, Sarah realized that the journey to uncover her past had become more than just a search for answers. It had evolved into a profound exploration of her own identity, a test of her values, and a crucible in which the woman she was meant to be would be forged. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges she could scarcely imagine. But for the first time in her life, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that transcended her personal struggles. She was no longer just Sarah Thompson, orphan and survivor. She was the keeper of a legacy, the bearer of a truth that had the power to reshape the world. As she walked into the unknown, Sarah carried with her the strength of her parents' sacrifice, the wisdom gleaned from her journey, and the unwavering determination to see justice done, no matter the cost. The mystery of her past had been resolved, but the implications of that resolution were only beginning to unfold. Sarah knew that the choices she made in the coming days would not only define her future, but could potentially alter the course of history itself. With each step, she felt herself transforming, shedding the last vestiges of uncertainty and embracing the mantle of responsibility that had been thrust upon her. The path ahead was daunting, but Sarah moved forward with resolve, ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. For in uncovering the truth of her origins, she had discovered something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge of who she was and what she was capable of. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows behind her, Sarah squared her shoulders and pressed on. The journey that had begun with a single letter had become an odyssey of self-discovery, a quest for justice, and a testament to the enduring power of truth. Whatever the future held, Sarah was ready to face it, armed with the strength of her convictions and the legacy of those who had sacrificed everything to give her this chance. The road stretched out before her, a blank canvas awaiting the story she would write with every choice and every action. And as she walked, Sarah felt, for the first time in her life, truly and completely free.